Who are the agents of hate in America seeking to change the direction of this country? I believe we need to know the answer to that question.
Well, first you need to understand, especially for Christians, that Satan is in a psychological war and has been for thousands of years. What he seeks to do is to change our behavior. And for Christians, he uses lies, temptations, and manipulations. And he also is the father of fear. You know, if you go into the scriptures, 300 times I think it is, that, you know, certainly in the Old Testament and especially in the New Testament, you know, Jesus basically says, don't be fearful. And yet, you know, with COVID-19, with race riots, with all the instability with our economy and so forth, even Christians are being fearful. Now, that reminds me in something that I illustrate in Collision Course, and that is we Christians must learn to be water walkers and not wave gazers. Now, you will recall that when the apostles, the disciples, jumped into the boat there in Galilee, and they were in the middle of the sea, and there was a terrible storm. And then, of course, Peter, of all people, looks out on the water and sees Jesus walking toward the ship. And what does Peter say? Lord, if it's you, call me. And the Lord says, come. So Peter gets off the side of the boat and starts to walk on with his eyes on the Lord. But what happened? Before he reaches the Lord, he looks down and sees the waves. He becomes fearful. And the Lord reaches his hand and saves him. He says, man of little faith. You know, we today, amidst all this fear that is racking this country, we need to be water walkers. We need to keep our eyes on Jesus and do what he would have us do, not be so concerned with the terrible things that are going on in our country, but more concerned with the Lord would have us do. So that's the type of thing that we need to wrestle with. We need to discard the fear and be, you know, people of faith and reliance upon the Lord and do those things that he has called us to do. And I go through a lot of those things in Collision Course. And I just hope that, you know, the Christians that are hearing this today will understand that lies and temptations and manipulation is the psychological warfare effort of Satan and his proxies. Now, who are those proxies? Well, mainstream media fans the fuel of discontent. They're constantly saying things that, quite frankly, are not true. And they're feeding the radicals on the left and promoting them as, you know, giants like Goliath against little David. Well, we may be little David, but we've got plenty of rocks in that little bag, and we know what to do with them. And so we need to be aggressive in our love for the Lord in doing the types of things that he has called us to do. The other people, of course, are associations. You have, you know, like the Southern Poverty Law Center. You know, I happen to be a senior fellow with the Family Research Council, used to be the vice president for policy. The SPLC labels most, you know, conservative Bible-believing organizations and churches as bigoted. And yet, you know, it was their material that, you know, really fueled a man that, according to court papers, that went in years ago and tried to shoot up and kill as many of the people on our staff at the Family Research Council. Because of our Christian beliefs in the sanctity of the marriage between one man and one woman, they disbelieve, you know, that is our right to believe in what our God has told us. And then, of course, you have other groups. I've written a book a number of years ago, which you're familiar with, called Never Submit. And it was all about the genocide of Christians at the hand of Muslims, of Islam in the Middle East. Well, that's a proxy, I argue, of Satan that is going after Christians. If you look at, you know, Open Doors or a variety of ministries that record what's going on around the world, 3 out of 7 Christians in today's world are persecuted. Some very overtly, some are murdered. I think about 11 a day. Others are incarcerated for their faith. So that's a proxy of Satan. And then I would argue that corporations that promote, abortion on demand, homosexual, homosexuality as the moral equivalency of heterosexuality, and there are a number of them that I name by name in Collision Course. And then, of course, I have an entire chapter on what I would call Satan's greatest human proxies. Now, through the history of mankind, there have been some very famous people that have killed millions and millions of people. Mao Zedong, has been accredited with maybe the butchering of 70 million people. Stalin in Russia, maybe killed 20 million people. Hitler and others. Well, today's modern proxies of Satan, people that are true antichrists, I would argue, are Kim Jong-un of North Korea, certainly President Xi of China, because of the terrible things they're doing to Christians in that country, and I document those well. I would argue in our culture today, George Soros, who, of course, funds Antifa and Black Lives Matter and other radical groups, is a major antichrist, and I document that. I think a lot of people won't understand until they go to, one of the sources I use was what Home Builders documents about the presidency of Barack Hussein Obama, and over 100 very well-recorded, well-documented examples of his anti-biblical actions that have really come after, of course, Christians in America, very anti-Christian behaviors and decisions and displays. So, there are a host of these people. There are a host of organizations. There are a host of other groups that are targeting Christ believers. And of course, ultimately, they're targeting the message of Jesus Christ, which is the concern that we should all have.